So Dan Crenshaw appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience once again, and as you can see from the like to dislike ratio here, that's insane. 6.8k likes to 9.5k dislikes. The video is titled Dan Crenshaw's Problem with Stimulus Checks. And so basically what Dan Crenshaw did was he went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and what he was saying was he actually his main idea that he's presenting here is actually his disgust with populism, right? Populism is typically, considered to essentially be policies that are desired by the general population that would benefit the general population. So, welfare benefits, increased healthcare, wages, unionization, blah, blah, blah. Those are things that are typically considered to be, populist. Go back to the early populist movement in the U.S. and the late 1800s and stuff like that. A lot of unionization, regulations and things of that nature that were desired by populists. And so what you're going to see here is Dan Crenshaw, like a moron, is going to go against sending out stimulus checks during the coronavirus pandemic. But what's pretty annoying about this situation is I feel like a previous Joe Rogan from 2018 or something like that, maybe even 2019, would have challenged him on this. But what you're going to see is what Dan Crenshaw says is incredibly stupid. And then on top of that, you're also going to see Joe Rogan be an idiot.
Is special because there's value in suffering. And in today's society, we have convinced ourselves that there is no value in suffering, that the entire role of, say, government is to end your suffering. But this is a false promise. Not only is it a false promise, but it will create a weak society that is unable to sustain itself. That's a really important point, and I think there's deep truth in that. This is why victimhood politics is so dangerous, and I would say populism is too. I think the two are almost indistinguishable from each other. People are always trying to talk about populism on the right and the left, and I say, look, well, here's what populism is. It's telling you what you feel. It's mirroring your feelings back to you. It's telling you what you want to hear as opposed to the truth. So I think that's a decent definition of populism. I don't like it. I don't like people embracing it. It doesn't just mean, hey, things that are good that people are for. Well, you know what? A lot of people are for $1,600 checks that are free. That doesn't mean it's a good policy.
Right.
That's a good example of populism.
People voted. If they voted and said, do you want $100,000 free a year?
Totally.
Everybody would vote yes.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
but is it a sustainable policy? Of course not.
Of course not.
And the kind of amounts to the I think drastic lurches in welfare policy or infrastructure spending and all of these things that we're seeing. It's populism on steroids. It's telling you what you want to hear. And that's not truth. That's not truth. And we have to get back to truth. And we have to get away from this victimhood mentality where we actually elevate this idea of being helpless. See, that's what's changed. That's what's changed in the last decade. It used to be that, well, you might feel some shame if you were the type to, I need some help. I feel bad about it. I'm going to get back on my feet, but I need some help right now. That used to be the sort of American way, all right? We need a safety net. Nobody would disagree with that. We need a safety net. We need to help people who have truly fallen on hard times, who lost their jobs because of COVID. But does that also mean we need to provide a $1,400 check to somebody who never lost their job and whose biggest hardship has been Zoom meetings? Of course not. But over 100 million people were getting checks that never lost their jobs.
100 million?
Easily.
Through COVID?
It's way more. It's way more than that. I'm cutting it off at 100 million. So
hold on, explain that to me.
When we send out checks, the direct cash payments, I've always been against direct cash payments.
So the COVID stimulus checks.
Yeah.
So
because they go out to anybody
who
makes
those checks that didn't lose their jobs.
Of course.
What?
Yeah, if the cutoff was like $75K a year, so that means
wait a minute.
That means every federal, well, not every, but a lot of federal workers getting them too. So people that didn't lose
any money because of the pandemic still got checks.
Yeah, these were never based on your situation.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
It's ridiculous.
I didn't know that. I thought you had to lose your job. I thought there was a problem.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
If your
so
staff
people who never lost a penny. So if you look at their tax receipts, you look at their what they made in 2019 versus 2020.
Correct.
If they didn't lose any money.
Yeah. No. It's based on just your income. So I think $75K a year was the cutoff. But also, if you're a married couple, $150K, and if you have kids, then it's even more. So you've got I've got a lot of active duty military friends who are getting thousands of dollars because they have kids and But it's like, why? And they're like, why am I getting, this is such a waste of taxpayer money. You know what I mean? Do your duty and go spend it on a local business that's been suffering.
The money was allocated to people that lost money because of the pandemic.
No. Because we already have a system for that. It's unemployment insurance. Our system works fine for that. And this was always my thing. It's like, look, I'm in favor of temporarily boosting payments to those who are unemployed.
Yeah, so what you could see there was just obviously incredibly infuriating on the part of both Dan Crenshaw and Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, what you can see is, I don't even know if Joe Rogan is just like playing dumb. There's a couple of possibilities here. Either Joe Rogan has become such an elitist rich douchebag that he genuinely didn't know anything about the relief bill or stimulus checks, or maybe he didn't know anybody who got any stimulus checks. Something of that nature. He's so out of touch and so elitist that he has no idea about it. Or he's just faking it to either just because he wants to maintain harmony with Dan Crenshaw, which doesn't really seem to be likely. But what the other option would be, he's trying to do it to kind of fit in with the Republican elitist douchebags, because the guy you're seeing on screen, Dan Crenshaw, he is one of those elitist guys. And so that's why, he has all these friends who are high ups who are getting the stimulus checks and, being like, getting all this cash and all that stuff. So, that's the kind of thing that you're seeing here. And so clearly what you can tell is he's out of touch with this whole, society, economics-wise, etc. And Joe Rogan has completely gone back on everything. And as you guys remember, he got into a pretty heated debate, and I felt like he really held his own or kind of destroyed Dan Crenshaw in a debate on Medicare for All. So we've seen that Joe Rogan is not afraid to push back on Dan Crenshaw. So why did he withhold this time? The reasons I just provided are the only things I could think of. But in terms of addressing the stuff that Dan Crenshaw said and its insanity, what is a stimulus check? Does a stimulus check is a check sent to a taxpayer by the U.S. government. Stimulus checks are intended to stimulate the economy by providing consumers with some spending money. Taxpayers receive this money because it's intended to boost consumption and drive revenue at retailers and manufacturers, spurring the economy. So, stimulus checks and just in general, stimulus in general is a sort of Keynesian idea that when you're in times of recession and there's debt, you want to attempt to stimulate the economy instead of letting it just kind of die, or as it's dying, you want to stimulate the economy by putting money into it. So the government sends out checks to people. What are you going to do with that check? If you have to pay for your bills or whatever, that's what you're going to pay for. And if you have money that is left over, or you have money that's left over, you go and use it on local businesses or businesses in general. What you don't understand is, dude, 70%, I think 70% of like the U.S. economy is consumer spending. And that's one thing I don't like about the U.S. economy, is that it just seems to be so unstable and like this house of cards. First of all, there's a huge amount of the populace that lives paycheck to paycheck. But then when you realize that such a huge chunk, a majority of the economy is based on consumer spending, it's like, damn, like you get rocked just based on any little sort of rockiness that goes on. And so in order to prevent it from going into like depression mode, you have to stimulate the economy. And so you get cash and then you go spend it. When you spend money, you are spurring the economy, because when you purchase goods, a business can then hire employees and they can continue to grow their business. This is how the economy works. If people don't have enough money to buy things, the economy will die quickly, very fast, especially in a very consumer-based economy. And so the reason why they're sending these stimulus checks to people who may not be unemployed, and by the way, there's like, the real number of unemployed is very difficult to calculate in these times, but it's somewhere between like 10 or 20 million, basically. But there are millions of people who do not have, whose hours were cut down and things of that nature. So it's really hard to calculate those things. And so the unemployment benefits and that stuff is not enough. We're in a very big hole in terms of our economy because of coronavirus. And so in order to spur that economy, what you have to do is you send out the stimulus checks. That's the whole purpose of the stimulus, ergo the whole, hence the term stimulus, right? It's the reason why it's called stimulus, is because you need to stimulate the economy that's dying down. And this is the whole point of government, right? You enter into this social contract with the mediator, which is the government, and when the government is sending out checks, especially to people who are making like under 75 or 150 or whatever, these are people really paying taxes. You know what I mean? Like, these are the people who their taxes are, much more valuable in terms of percentage wise than rich people are. And a lot of rich people don't even pay taxes. So, you got poor middle class people who actually have to pay their taxes. And as a percentage wise, in terms of how much income they're making, they're paying a lot. And so it's really your own money coming back to you. This is the whole point of a government, right? You pay taxes so that in a situation like this, what happens? They give you relief. That's the whole point. Literally the whole point. That's the whole situation. The original idea and desire for government was to protect private property and all that stuff. And so, of course, he talks about the unemployment situation with businesses not being able to hire people. Don't even know if that's really true. But the point of giving unemployment aid was because of it was a very infectious disease, and so you don't want people working. You want people at home. And so that was kind of the point. And then when he talks about the value in suffering, that just sounds like really sociopathic, very scary, very depraved. And I'm not sure if, he was in the military, obviously, and so he maybe turned into a sociopath from that experience. Who knows? That's what I would imagine. It's not surprising that often when people are, if not always, when people are, exposed to those kinds of events where people are dying and you're seeing really bad things happen, oftentimes you will turn sociopathic. That's what that sounds like. So it sounds social Darwinistic almost. Sort of socially Darwinistic almost is what it sounds like to me. And so again, all of this stuff that he's saying, and it's really interesting because what he's doing is he's sparking this war between populism and traditional conservatism, because traditional conservatism is not populism. And so what you really saw here in terms of the checks and the public opinion on checks was a really big win for populism, a really big win for left-wing economics. And I think that's the main reason why Dan Crenshaw doesn't like it, is because if you can start sending out these checks that spur the economy in times of need, is that going to start the conversation for a universal basic income? Very likely so. And so that's likely why he's worried, and he's just not a fan of that. And the truth about politics, if you study political science, you take any political science courses, it's about inputs and outputs, right? It's about interest groups and stuff like that. Inputs, outputs. So, there are Republicans who, may otherwise not support something like that, but they'll support it in this dire of a time because they have to, in terms of that's their, that's their output that they're putting back, right? And so that they can get people to vote for them. And you have to try to get those people to vote for you. It's, political science 101, essentially, unless you want to lose. And so that's what's really interesting to see. I saw Sagar and Jetty put out a video talking about it, which is very interesting. So, that's the situation here. The stuff Dan Crenshaw is saying is stupid. The stuff Joe Rogan was saying was very bizarre, bewildering, confusing. And it's just crazy to see the complete 180 of Joe Rogan. I mean, I guess a big question you could really ask yourself is, was this always who Joe Rogan was, and he was faking as being this guy who was, the common man type of dude? I mean, he was always very rich, just so you guys know. Like, this guy was middle class. He was rich this whole time. But, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Did he always secretly want to be this way? Is he happy this way? It almost seems like he's like he almost seems like he's like Hillary Clinton to me, the way that he's able to do this kind of transformation. So definitely very shocking to see this stuff from Joe Rogan. I don't think I would have expected this from Joe Rogan in 2018 or 2019 even. Again, just to repeat, that debate that Dan Crenshaw had with Joe Rogan on Medicare for All was, I think, like a year ago or something like that. So really, to me, the shift really seems to coincide with the Spotify deal, right, where he got that shitload of money and jetted off to Texas because he was literally throwing a hissy fit that during a pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen for 100 years, he couldn't go to the Comedy Store and give his shitty stand-up comedy that nobody likes. So that Spotify deal was definitely the turning point for Joe Rogan. And at this point, I'm not exactly sure, where he's going to go from here. But I don't know why anybody would watch him at this point. I mean, he's so out of touch. And again, it's so counterintuitive to his entire product. The whole product was supposed to be he's making fun of, the famous actors and celebrities and all of this stuff. He's the common man. He's like you. That's what he's like. So you listening, you're supposed to relate to him through that. But, you know what I mean? Like, it's so baffling to me because it's just so directly counterintuitive to your entire product. Your entire product is essentially dismantled and destroyed by this. But yeah, man, very frustrating stuff to watch. And a lot of people obviously here, this comment says, Joe is telling on himself in this clip on how much he is out of touch now. Joe, I'm too rich to understand poor people. Rogan. This was Joe Rogan and Dan Crenshaw's let them eat cake moment in history. These dudes are so effing out of touch with what's going on. You deserve to suffer. In fact, you should be happy to have the privilege. There's value in suffering. Okay, so when do the rich get this value? It's not free money, it's the money we paid in taxes that we are now getting back. That is true. I'm frankly stunned by this callous attitude. I'm a single father of 2 kids, and I never lost my job due to COVID. My hours were cut because I had to take my kids to school and have to get off early to pick them up. Their school hours were changed, so I only go to school 2 days out of the week, so I've lost plenty of money on childcare and time for work. I'm trying to say is these people have no idea of individual situation. Things are very hard for me already. COVID's made it extremely hard. So that's also true that a lot of people had to start caring for children and giving homeschooling, which is, obviously going to cost you a lot of money as well. So that's another way that people are, essentially being costed, having incurred costs from this situation. So live long enough, see yourself become the villain. As confused and surprised Joe sounds, it shows me how disconnected he and other rich people are from what goes on with regular people. This shocked me. Longtime listener Joe has finally joined the people who we thought were out of touch in a big, obvious way. Who didn't know everyone got a check below a certain income? That's a very good question. I don't know how you didn't know that. That's pretty basic common knowledge. But, you get the point. People are unanimous in the comment section. You can see the like to dislike bar. People hating on him hardcore. Joe Rogan is a moron. Dan Crenshaw is a moron. And RIP to the Joe Rogan podcast.